They were right. Liz was there dancing with a man. Dancing is a relative concept, her arms wrapped around his neck. He said something to her, and her head fell back. Her long hair hung down. It was obvious that she was drunk. I went up to them, took her hands off his neck, and started pulling her away. "Hey dude, what do you allow yourself?" her dancing partner asked. "She's my wife, and I'm taking her home," I said. Any resistance he wanted to put up immediately stopped. "She's all yours," he said, "and anyway, when she's drunk, it's not very good to make love to her." "And when she's sober?" I asked, picking her up in my arms to carry her outside. "Oh, then she's great. Ask anyone. We all consider her one of the best." "Someone opened the door for me." I carried her to my pickup truck and put her in the passenger seat. It took only a few minutes to get her to her parents' house, where they watched as I unceremoniously threw her on the bed. She was out like a light. Hell, she was probably passed out when they were caressing her ass on the dance floor. I didn't say a word when I left. Ruth was my older sister. She was one of my two sisters. The other was Esther Jacobs. I also have two brothers, Matthew and Luke Reynolds. My name is Mark Reynolds. Our parents were Southern Baptists all our lives, so all 5 of us children were baptized at City Co Creek in Venora, Tennessee, and grew up attending church every Wednesday night and all Sunday morning. We never had a TV, but we had a radio on which we were allowed to listen to gospel music, only on Sundays. Of course, when we were away from our parents or they were away from us, all the hidden devices came out and we became ordinary children. We tried to keep them out of the sight of Mom and Dad, but I'm sure they knew about them. Our parents learned to read in order to read the Bible, and that's the only thing they've ever read. We grew up in poverty. All 5 of us children realized early on that we didn't want to lead the same lifestyle as our parents. When each of us graduated from high school, we couldn't wait to leave Venora. Ruth and Matthew made it to Nashville. Esther and Luke only made it to Madisonville. None of them went to college. Ruth has always been able to cook and started working as a cook's assistant at a diner. Matthew went to truck driving school, where he fell into a pile of manure and came out smelling like a rose. One of the instructors took him under his wing, and when he graduated from high school, he got him a job as a driver for one of the Nashville megastars. Such work is worth its weight in gold, and usually only senior, well-known, experienced drivers get it, but his instructor had his own person. Matthew turned out to be a much better than average truck driver, and he had the character to match it. I was a little different. After high school, I enrolled at Vanderbilt University on a 4-year Army ROTC Reserve Officer Training Corps scholarship. Upon graduation, I received the rank of second lieutenant. In the U.S. Army, there are 2 ranks of lieutenants, first and second. In our opinion, a senior lieutenant and a junior lieutenant. My first assignment after the officer basic course was to the headquarters of the 8th Army in Korea. I served there for 13 months, after which I returned home for a 30-day vacation and went to my next duty station at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I spent a few days with my parents, and then went to Nashville to visit Ruth. Our brother Matthew was on tour somewhere. He drove one of several trucks that contained equipment for the Stars show. Lights, rigging, everything needed to stage a big Nashville show were in the trucks. Ruth had a small apartment, and I slept on her couch. She was dating a man she met at a cooking class she attended at a local community college. His name was Gerald Thompson. Gerald had a sister named Elizabeth, but everyone called her Liz. One evening, the 4 of us went out to dinner. Then Liz and I went alone. Then we went again. By the time my vacation came to an end, Liz and I had a pretty close relationship. Robert Campbell was only an hour's drive from Nashville, so I spent a lot of time there, and Liz spent a lot of time in Campbell. We made love on the 4th date and never stopped. 18 months after we met, we got married. Liz was a native of Nashville and had never lived anywhere else. Her father was a urologist and her mother was a stay-at-home mother. Liz and I did a 3-year internship at Campbell, after which we were sent to Germany. Germany has become a huge cultural shock for both of us. Liz participated in the work of the Rookie Club and the Officers' Wives Club. She learned to play bridge and played weekly with other wives. We also joined the Travelers Club. Once a month we went to different places: Italy, Switzerland, Spain, and so on. In the last few months of our 3-year journey, she began to really enjoy European wine. I grew up in a non-drinking family and never got addicted to alcohol. Our next assignment was at Fort Campbell, which pleased us both. We moved into a government apartment and were happy for about 6 months. That's when Liz started spending a lot of time in Nashville. We were coming over for the weekend and she wanted to stay for another day or so. It turned into an extra 3 days. By the end of the year, she was actually living with her parents. I went there on weekends. The only sign of trouble was that one Friday I went to her parents' house and Liz wasn't there. They had no idea where she was. I got off early and arrived right after lunch. Her mother made excuses that they didn't expect me so early. I started to bring my bag into Liz's room, but her mother tried to stop me. "Give me a chance to get everything in order first," she said. "It's okay," I replied. The room was a mess. Dirty clothes were strewn everywhere. It seemed strange to me that the bed was littered with dirty clothes, but it was obvious that it was made up and had not been slept on. From the amount of dirty clothes piled up, it was obvious that she hadn't been slept in for at least a couple of nights. Her mother was trying to put away dirty clothes, and I saw her kicking her panties under the bed. I managed to get her out of the room, saying that I needed to go to the bathroom. When she left, I took my panties out from under the bed. There were 2 more pairs, and I took them too. I took them into the living room. Her mother was on the phone, but hung up as soon as she saw me. I held my panties up. "How long has she been sleeping with other men?" I asked. "I think that's something you should discuss with her," her mother said. I went back into the bedroom, picked up my overnight bag, put my panties in my side pocket, and walked out the door. "Will you come back?" her mother asked. I didn't answer and went straight to Ruth's house. He and Liz's brother stopped dating a couple of years ago, but they remained friends. Since then, Ruth has met and married a record store owner named Eric Wyndham. Liz and I came to the States for their wedding. I called Ruth on the way to her house, and she told me where she had the key hidden. She was busy, so we couldn't talk. However, she managed to say that she would not be able to leave work until midnight because she would have to close the restaurant that evening. I tried to call Liz at her house, but no one answered, so I left a message. "This is your husband. You know, the only man you should be sleeping with. I would like to hear your explanation of why this is no longer the case. I would also like to know how many others there were and why." Eric got home around 7, and I brought him up to speed. Ruth called a little after 8. She said that her ex-boyfriend Liz's brother had just called her. He, in turn, had just learned from his friend that Liz had gotten drunk and flirted with several men at the Count Monte music bar. He was going to pick her up and take her home. Ruth told him not to worry. "I was there, and I'll take care of it." When I threw her on the bed, both her parents were there. Her mother started scolding me, saying that whatever Liz did was my fault because I took her to Germany, where she learned to drink and do all sorts of nasty and evil things. I looked at both of them, left, and headed back to Ruth's house. Eric and I chatted until Ruth got home, and then the 3 of us stayed and chatted until 3 o'clock. I was sleeping on their couch again. When I woke up at 7, I made myself a couple of hours. I was in the shop of coffee and sat on the porch of their house, preparing for a conversation with Liz. Ruth and Eric joined me at 9. We talked for about an hour more. They were interested in what I was going to do, and I told them I had no idea. It was already 10 o'clock when I rang the doorbell of my relatives. Liz's father opened the door and stepped aside so I could enter. Liz was sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee. I walked up to her and threw the soiled panties on the coffee cup. She picked them up, dropped them on the floor, raised the cup to her lips, and took a sip. "Why?" I asked Liz. "You don't have to answer that question, honey." Her mother interjected. "Don't interfere," I said coldly. "Why?" I repeated to Liz. She looked up at me. "I needed to be loved, and you weren't here. How many times have you needed love, and I haven't been here?" "What? How many times have you made love to other men?" "I don't know. Guess what? 6, maybe 7, maybe 10. I'm not sure. Does our marriage mean anything to you?" She raised her head and, looking directly at me, took another sip of coffee without answering. I went out and went back to Ruth. The story of what happened did not take long, and she didn't repent. "Didn't you apologize?" Ruth asked. "No. This is a woman with a cold heart," she said. "That's exactly what I thought," I said. There was no point in staying in Nashville, so I went to Fort Campbell. On Sunday afternoon, I was surprised when Liz came into our house. I stretched out on the couch, and she sat on my arm on the side where my legs were. She sat there for a couple of minutes. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't say another word. If the only reason you cheated is because I wasn't around, you deliberately felt like you were in a house. I was 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 in a house. You deliberately didn't come home so that I couldn't take care of you and your needs. You chose to get drunk and sleep with strangers instead of going home and sleeping with your husband. That's a pretty pathetic excuse for ruining a marriage. And your parents are as much to blame as you are for letting you do this. The only thing you can do now is pack up and leave." "I don't want to leave. I said I was sorry. It won't happen again. I don't care how many times it happens again. As far as I understand, we are no longer married, so you can do what you want and with whom you want. All I care about is that you're leaving." I took the remote control and turned on the TV. She snatched it out of my hands and pressed the mute button. "I'm not leaving. You are my husband, and this is my home." She tossed the remote back to me and left the room. She cooked dinner, and I made a sandwich and ate in the living room. She ate everything she had cooked and stayed in the kitchen. When it was time to go to bed, I took a shower and went to bed. She took a shower and got into bed, snuggling up to me as close as she could. I rolled over. "Do you seriously think that I will ever make love to you after 6, 7, or 10 other men have used your body?" I said, "I'm sorry. And you think that makes everything better?" "Yes, you really need help. I can't stop you from sleeping in this bed, but I don't have to stay here and think about all these men making love to you." I went into the living room and fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, she was sitting in an armchair and watching me. I ignored her, showered, shaved, put on my uniform, and went to work. After reporting, I talked to the commander and brought him up to date. If I were you, I would go to a lawyer first. Take as much time as you need. I talked to several lawyers that day and settled on Kirby Dickinson. He was a retired Army lawyer and knew what military personnel had to deal with. "What do you want from me and why?" He asked. "I need your advice because I have no idea what I'm doing." I replied, "Do you want to try to save the marriage?" "No." "Why?" "Because she cheated, and I will not tolerate cheating spouse." "How do you know that she has changed?" I told him, "It doesn't mean anything in court, Lieutenant." By that time, I was already a first lieutenant. "She can tell you and 100 other people that she made love to the Army and Navy football team on the 50. She was in a hard line with a full stadium, and then deny it when she appears before the judge, and the judge will believe her if you don't have proof." He shook his head. "It's just a fact." He made a pause. "So, if you don't want to keep the marriage, then you want to get divorced. Am I right?" "Yes, sir. I suppose so. And I think you don't want it to be easy for her. Am I right again?" "Yes, sir. You're right again." "Good. I like it when people agree with me. This reinforces what I already know. And what is it that I'm a smart bastard?" We both laughed. "That's what I think you should do. If she lives with you, then don't pay attention to her. Don't pay attention to her. Even if she screams and throws shit at you. If she's lucky, she'll leave and return home to her mom or to her boyfriend or somewhere else far away from you. When she does, she will most likely return to her old adulterous habits and find someone to sleep with. When she does, all we have to do is make sure there's someone around who can film it. When we come to court, even if the judge says that we cannot use the video, he will know that you are telling the truth and your wife really cheated on you. I can almost promise that he or she will rule in your favor. That's the way it is in Kentucky. The disadvantage of this plan is that someone has to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to film her machinations, and it won't be cheap. But I guarantee that it will save you in the long run. Do you agree? Absolutely. Good. Write me a check for my fee, and then write a check for the detective I'll find for you. I felt better, but even poorer when I returned to my office. Liz called me at 6 o'clock in the evening, and according to Kirby Dickinson's instructions, I didn't answer. When I entered the house, it was already past 10. She was waiting for me. "How long will this last?" "What is it?" she asked. I apologized. Now we can get back to normal life. I ignored her and headed for the shower. 20 minutes later, I was lying in bed and I heard her car driving away. I got up, looked into our shared closet, and almost all of her clothes were gone. Back in bed, I fell asleep. The next morning, I called Kirby Dickinson and said that she had probably left for Nashville. Great, I have friends there. Do you know where she might go? I gave him her parents' address. Good. Time has started, he said. It's been less than a week, and I had a video of her making love with 2 men. 48 hours after I received the video, she was handed papers demanding that our marriage be dissolved due to adultery. Less than an hour after receiving the documents, she called and tearfully begged me to forgive her. I hung up the phone. I brought my boss up to date. He had gone through the same thing a few years earlier. The difference was that his wife cheated on him when he was in a war zone. This is without a doubt the worst thing a spouse can do: cheat while a serviceman is under threat. My next step was to inform Post Housing that I was vacating my apartment. The next day, I moved to the BOQ, Bachelor Officer's Quarters. 3 days after that, Liz called and said she couldn't get into the house. I told her it wasn't our house anymore. I moved out because she left me, and I have no right to housing as a single officer. But you're not single. You're married, she said. I laughed and pressed the in-call button. I guess she's back in Nashville. As I mentioned, I don't like to drink alcohol. It started with my Southern Baptist upbringing. But even as an adult, I was never able to get addicted to it. It was the same with swearing. I've never been able to get used to swearing. Other people drinking and using rude language were quite normal. They just weren't for me. In the same way, I'm not a prude. Dancing up close is great if you were dancing with your wife or girlfriend. I like a woman's body, and if she wants to show it, of course I'm ready to look. However, that evening I used all the 4-letter words "fuck" that I had ever heard, and probably came up with some of them when I watched a video of my wife making love with 2 men. I turned on the video on my computer. It started with her dancing on the dance floor with 2 men at the same time. All 3 of them took liberties intended only for private places such as bedrooms. This went on for several minutes until they left the dance floor, left the building, and got into the car. The detective followed them to a cheap 1-story motel where they rented a room. He wandered outside until he came to a room with an open window and a curtain. There was a couple making love there, but they weren't the right people. So he kept walking until he found Liz's room. The window in it was also open, but the trio didn't seem to care. Without wasting any time, they undressed. Seeing my wife undress in front of 2 men was unreal, but nothing compares to what happened next. At first, I thought she might be drunk, but the way she spoke didn't indicate that. "Come on, guys," she said, "show me what you have prepared for me." I've never done it with 2 at the same time. It's probably going to be fun. They lay side by side for a few more minutes. He slapped her harder. "I'm gonna rip your fucking hair out." That's better. I screamed in pain, but that didn't stop him. Then she started to move. I turned off the computer. I couldn't explain her behavior in any way. She said she was doing it because she needed love. And I wasn't there. I had no experience with cheating wives, but it was one of the flimsiest excuses for cheating in her entire history. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. That's because her parents knew I'd taken the panties and guessed what was in them. They probably waited until she got up the next morning and talked to her. So by the time I got there, she already knew that the job was done. That week at work, after watching part of the video, was just a godsend. I was busy all day every day, so the memories of the video faded somewhat. Kirby Dickinson called me on Friday and said we had an appointment with her and her lawyer on Monday. When I arrived, her parents were with her. I asked Kirby to tell them that we were going to show a visual video, and maybe it would be better if her parents weren't there. He told Liz's lawyer about it. We saw him talking to the 3 of them. I saw Liz shaking her head in refusal. I heard her say, "I don't believe them." Good. The gloves were off, and as Kirby had already said, the game has begun. It didn't take long. Her lawyer demanded to exclude adultery as the reason for the divorce. Mental cruelty should be used instead, because I caused her so much mental suffering that she could not be near me. That is why she was forced, in fact, to live with her parents. Kirby and I looked at each other. My computer was on the table, and the video was turned on exactly where I stopped it. I looked at them all. "Elizabeth," I said, "I very rarely called her that just to get her attention. Are you sure you want your parents to see this?" "Did you see what? That I'm holding hands with some guy?" or am I dancing with him? Choose what's best. I pressed play and the whole room saw her. Stop it! Oh my God, stop it! She screamed. Her mother lost consciousness, and her father tried to revive her, all the while looking at his daughter. When the mother came to her senses, the father looked at her. I want you to get out of our house. Today, he and his wife had no problems with her cheating until they saw the extent of her debauchery. He carefully helped his wife up and began to leave the room. He stopped when he reached me. You shouldn't have done that. Would you have believed me if I hadn't? I asked. No, probably not, but there could be a better way. Your daughter didn't need to cheat. We never heard from them again. And when the trial was scheduled, neither Liz nor her lawyer showed up. 6 weeks later, I was a free man with all our meager possessions and no alimony. 6 more weeks, and I was ordered to go play in a sandbox in the Middle East. I spent 2 days with Ruth and her husband, and then went home to spend time with my parents and other siblings. I drove my pickup truck to my parents' house and left it to my father to use and look after it while I was gone. Matthew was on another tour with his megastar. My other brother and sister were still in Madisonville. Both were married and had children. I survived a year in the sandbox, leaving nothing but unpleasant memories of it. However, I returned already with the rank of captain, which was nice. My new assignment took me to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I commanded the garrison at Den, the Command and General Staff College, CGSC. It was the best choice for any captain, but being assigned there as a very young captain with no command experience had to be a mistake. I even called my office in Washington to confirm this. Are you complaining, Captain Reynolds? Because if so, there are a couple hundred other captains who will gladly take your place. No, I'm perfectly happy. I just wanted to make sure that someone wouldn't notice the mistake and transfer me to another position in 3 months. No, Captain Reynolds, you were fixed for 3 years, unless, of course, we need you back in the sandbox. If that happens, you can always send one of those couple hundred other captains you mentioned, instead of me. We both laughed. It didn't take me long to get into a good steady rhythm. Of course, it didn't hurt that an experienced first sergeant did everything for me. On Saturday, I was at the car repair shop on the pit. It had facilities and equipment for minor repairs of our personal cars. There was even an experienced mechanic who helped those who needed it. I wasn't an expert, but I grew up in the country and knew the difference between a spark plug and a nut, so I was pretty good on my own. When I arrived, there weren't many people, and I started changing the oil. There were 3 pits for oil change and work under the car. I had been in my pit for about 5 minutes when another car drove into the pit next to me. I didn't pay attention to it until I heard it. Damn piece of shit. It sounded like a soft but determined female voice. It was quiet again until the wrench fell and hit the concrete floor. Oh, damn it, I heard. I chuckled to myself and decided that maybe the voice needed help tightening the drain. Plug. I climbed the steps out of the pit. Then he went down the steps into the pit next to mine. She was wearing a jumpsuit 2 sizes too big. Do you need help? I asked. She turned to look at me, and I saw that an attractive face was hiding under a layer of oil. She spat out a mouthful of butter and looked at me. Why do you think I need help? Because I'm a woman and women don't know how to change oil? Well, no. It just seemed to me that you were upset, and I thought I could help. No thanks. I know what I'm doing. I just hate this piece of shit. Okay, have a nice day. I went to my car, poured oil into it, and drove away without seeing her again. The following week, I was at a cocktail party hosted by the Commander General. I was invited only because I was the commander of the garrison, not because I was part of the closed environment of 3 generals and countless colonels serving at Fort Leavenworth. I bought a Coke and wandered around, wondering if there were any other officers of my age and rank with whom I had something in common. I didn't expect to find them, and I wasn't disappointed. I looked at my watch and decided that, from the point of view of protocol, I still had 15 minutes before I could gracefully exit. The backyard looked like a promising place, so I headed there. I was already walking out the door when I heard a voice. Anyway, Dad made me learn to do things on my own in case I ever found myself in a difficult situation. So I decided to change the oil myself. It took me over an hour, and I had oil from my hair to my nails, including my mouth. I even spilled it on the instructions, which made it almost impossible to read. But the worst part was that this incredibly handsome guy offered to help me, and I told him I didn't need anything. If I had any common sense, I would have asked for help just to find out his name and phone number. The group she was with were all laughing until another female voice said, "What do you mean? I would ask for his name and phone number. You've never done this before." I know, but there was something in his face that made me... I don't know. I can't explain it. There was just something about him. And I saw it, even though I was angry and upset. Wow, he must have been something special. I think so. I chuckled to myself and tried to look at her. I was interested to see what she looks like without oil. After passing through the patio doors, I looked left, then right. There were 3 women standing to my right. One of them was about my age, maybe a couple of years younger, but who knows? Our eyes met for the briefest of moments, after which I turned and walked back into the house. I knew she recognized me. I found a corner where I could stand aside and watch. The 3 women went inside and immediately headed for the front door. In most military houses, there's a stand with a cup, saucer, or metal tray just outside the front door, where military guests leave one of their business cards with their name and rank, and you left it every time you were a guest in this house. The women approached the tray with business cards and began sorting through them. When they found one, they gathered around each other to examine it before looking at me. I tried to be as inconspicuous as possible, but being the only officer of the company class, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, or captain in a house full of senior officers, major, and above was quite funny. It wouldn't be difficult for them to find out which of the cards is mine. I was in uniform and the only officer below the major. All they had to do was go through all the cards until they got to mine. In addition, the name tag on my uniform said, "Reynolds" in large letters. I was trying to decide whether I should ask her about the car, thereby identifying myself, or wait and see what they, or rather she, were going to do. I hadn't had a real date in a long time, and I almost desperately wanted love, but I decided to wait. When the timer of my mental protocol went off, I went to the hostess, the wife of Major General Morris T. Woodley, thanked her for a great time, found my cap, which was not difficult, since it was the only one on the table without scrambled eggs, gold braid on the rim. Twice I stole a glance at the 3 women who were also furtively watching me. The mysterious lady and I had 2 areas of activity in common. Firstly, it's the general's party, and secondly, the car repair shop. I couldn't hang out at the general's house in the hope that she would fit, but I could hang out in the workshop. Saturday morning, I was washing and polishing my pickup truck in the workshop. I took my time and was almost done when I saw her car pull up to the building. She got out of the car and she wasn't wearing a jumpsuit. She was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt with gold sequins on the front. My pickup truck was inside the building and she parked outside. She got out of the car and walked towards me when she was met by a man whom I recognized as a major from BOQ. He started talking to her, and it looked like she wanted to leave him, but he held her back in the conversation. We held each other's gaze for a full second before I turned away. I finished and 2 people were already waiting in my place, so I couldn't wait any longer. I had to leave. Her eyes never left me as I got into my pickup truck and drove away. I stopped at the side of the road and waited. Less than 5 minutes later, I saw her speeding in my direction, so I pulled off the road and headed for a retail store. PX is the Army equivalent of Walmart. There were a lot of people there, and I had to park quite far from the entrance. There were several reserved parking spaces right at the entrance. The one closest to the door said it was reserved for the commanding general. Her car was parked in this place. I almost turned around and drove home. It's a good thing I didn't do that. She was standing right in front of the door when I came in. "Are you playing hard to get?" That was the first thing she said, but she said it with a smile. "No, ma'am. And what? Are you trying to catch me?" She laughed out loud. "An interesting question. I'm not sure. Can you be caught? Maybe, but I'm not cheap." She pointed to the snack stand at the end of the hallway. "Will Coca-Cola do?" It was my turn to laugh, unless you're expecting too much. We got a Coke at the kiosk. She had a Diet One and she paid for both. We sat down at a table and 3 hours flew by unnoticed. Her phone rang at least 6 times, but she ignored it. Finally, she glanced at her watch and jumped up. Damn it, I have a date. I have to go. I got up. Well, who's playing hard to get now? We went to her car, and she drove off on her date. I haven't had dinner in a good restaurant for a long time, so I decided to go to the Officers Club. Their prime rib was excellent. I went into my Bokyu, hung out a bit, took a shower, put on a civilian suit, and headed to the club. The gym was closed because of the party, but the grill was open, so I sat there and ate. After eating, I went to the door and, passing by, looked into the hall. Right in the doorway, dancing close to each other, were the Major from Bokyu, and it dawned on me that I didn't know her name. Throughout our conversation, I never asked her name, and she never said it herself. I stood and watched them dance until they were pushed by another couple, and she looked in my direction. I turned and headed for the door. The Bokyu Club was a short walk away, so I headed there. There was a large lobby with 2 large TVs, a bar, and a snack table that was loaded with an officers' club. I was sitting drinking a Coke and watching a replay of NASCAR races. I stayed there for about 2 hours and was ready to go to my room when the Major came in. He got himself a beer and sat in the big chair next to mine. He asked me about the race, and I admitted that I didn't pay any attention to it. "You are the commander of the garrison, aren't you?" he asked. Yes, he held out his hand. "Ernie Bigelow, Post G3, Operations Department. Mark Reynolds, you already know where I work." We sat and talked. He was a pleasant, friendly type who was easy to talk to. So after a while, I told him that I had seen him dancing earlier at the club. "Your companion seemed familiar to me." He chuckled. "I have to. She's General Woodley's daughter, Christine. I don't want to get personal, but do you have something with her?" I asked. He laughed. "No, damn it. No one has anything to do with Miss Iceberg. I met her a few times, and every time I thought I was going to get a first base, she clipped my knees. Then why do you keep coming back?" I asked. Again, I do not know. Either I hope to unfreeze her, or I just love punishment. He looked at me. "It's funny that you asked me who she was, because she saw you tonight and asked if I knew who you were." He laughed. Not wanting any more competition, I told her I didn't know. Ernie Bigelow and I became friends. 3 days later, Christina Woodley called me and invited me to dinner. I agreed. That evening, I was sitting in the BOQ lobby, and Ernie was sitting next to me. He looked at me. "I heard you have a date with Christina." "Yes, on Friday for dinner." "How did you find out? Because I called and asked her out?" She didn't hesitate to tell me that she had a date and with whom, or whatever it's called. It was a surprise to me. I said, "She's holding her phone number. Can you tell me how you got it?" "I don't have it. She didn't give it to me." "Then how did you ask her out? You can't just walk up and knock on her door." I hesitated. "I didn't invite her. She called and asked me. I didn't think about how she got my number. She had my name on a business card that I left at her house, and she had access to the office phone book. Everything is simple." He looked at me and started laughing. "Well, I'll be damned. I've known her for almost 2 years, and she's never asked a guy out on a date. You must be special." "I don't know. Listen to me. She goes on dates, but rarely. Since I've been here, she's only dated me and 2 others. We have a pretty close company, and we keep an eye on each other, hoping to hear that one of us has made some progress. So far, a few close, slow dances and a couple of kisses on the cheek are all she's capable of." We sat and talked, and as I said, we became friends. He was sincere when he wished me luck with Christina. "Just keep me posted, and I'll make sure the other 2 know about you and your progress." Our dinner date went well. So good that I asked her out on a date, and so on and so on. Ernie found out that he was being transferred to Korea and invited her to go to a farewell dinner, but she refused him. Her exact words, or so he said, were, "I like Mark Ernie. I really like him, and I don't want to put that at risk. I always took her out of the house on our dates and talked to both of her parents. They didn't hate me, of course, but at the same time, they didn't welcome me with open arms." She told me that no one had ever gone that far. In the 7th month of our acquaintance, I received an order to return to the sandbox in the Middle East. I called my branch and asked about it. I thought I had a 3-year stable tour. I told my appointment manager. "It was Mark, but you must have angered someone because we were ordered to immediately transfer you to another position. You should arrive in the country in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Everyone gets at least 30 days. I called Christina. She was even more upset than I was. We talked for a few more minutes, And when we finished talking, she said, "I love you, Mark." She's never said that before. At 9 o'clock the next evening, I packed up and was ready to leave the next morning. Christina was going to come in to say goodbye. There was a knock on my door. I opened it, and it was her. She hugged me, and we kissed. "My father did it," she announced. "What did you do?" "I sent you away." "Why?" "He knows how I feel about you, and he's afraid he's going to lose me." "Sooner or later he will lose. With me or with someone else." "What do you mean by someone else?" "There is no one else. In the end, it will be if I don't come back." She hugged me again. I say that. She pulled back and looked at me. "Marry me." She said, "What?" "Marry me. This will fix it." I laughed. "Marrying me just to piss off your father is not a reason for marriage." She pulled away from me and sank into a chair. "Then I'll stay here for the night. This will make him very angry." I laughed again. "I'd love to stay the night with you, but you just had a fight with your dad. Where do you think he'll send the MP military police first if you don't come home? Then let's go to a motel outside the base." I knelt down in front of her. "I love you. Our first night together won't be a night of revenge or hiding. We will hold our heads high and declare our love to the whole world." She took my face in her hands, kissed me, and laughed. "I've already done it. Everyone at Leavenworth knows that I love you. Especially my father. That's why he transferred you to another position." We were huddled together in an armchair. The problem was that I loved her and wanted our first time to be perfect, and it wasn't. We were kissing when her phone rang. "Hi, Mom," she said, turning on the speakerphone. "Where are you?" I heard her mother ask. "In BOQ with Mark." "When are you coming home?" "Tomorrow when Mark leaves." She looked at me and grinned. There was a sharp intake of breath. "You know your father's going to kill you both, don't you?" "He's already killed, Mom." "When I transferred Mark, what should I tell him?" "Tell him I've grown up and I'm going to do what I want." "Goodbye, Mom. You know the cops are probably on their way." I said, "I don't care." "That's because you're just going home." "And I'm going to the punishment cell." She threw herself into my arms. We hugged and kissed for a long time. Then she looked into my eyes. "I love you. You know that. I've never been in love before. And I know that you love me. Would you like to know how I know that?" "Yes," I said. "I know that you respect me and don't rush things. You and I both know this is going to happen. You will be the first man to make love to me." She reached out and began to undo the buttons on her blouse. When all the buttons were undone, she pulled it off. Then she reached out from behind and unbuttoned her bra. She took it off without hesitation. She reached for my head and pulled me to her. "I've touched them, but I've never kissed them. No one has ever done this before." She moaned breathlessly. "I want you to remember them and come back for more. We're going to stop now, or we're not going to stop at all." I said, "I know, but I never thought it would be so good." She said breathlessly. She put on her blouse again and took off her bra. "Just remember that they belong to me. No one else will see or touch them." I said. She kissed me and smiled. "They are yours forever." She stood up, lifted her bra, and walked over to my back. I hadn't closed it yet, so she took the bra, folded it, and put it in her back. She looked at me and left in tears. Early the next morning, I was waiting for Major General Woodley when he arrived at his headquarters. When his driver arrived, I was already opening the door for him. When he saw me, he was surprised. He knew me, of course. "Why are you here, Captain?" he asked. "I'm here to tell you that, in my opinion, you're like a chicken shit father. You may be a good general, but as a father, you suck. You can send me anywhere, including the federal prison, at the other end of this space. But I will express my opinion. I love your daughter, and she says she loves me. This is probably something new for you, because if I understood the situation correctly, she has never been in love before. And it scares you because one day you will lose her to another man. It could be me, Ernie Bigelow, some private in a military camp, or a civilian doctor. But one day you will lose her. And when you do, I hope it will hurt you as much as it hurt her that you took advantage of your position and transferred me. When you see her at dinner tonight, I want you to look at her, knowing that you broke her heart, because that's the way it is. She can easily forget about me over the next year, which is what I'm sure you're trying to achieve. But she will fall in love again, and maybe again, and every time you lose more and more of her until she hates you." I didn't even salute him when I left. I fully expected to be stopped when I left the base and thrown in jail, but that didn't happen. Then I went to my sister Ruth, and then to my parents. I intended to leave my pickup truck with them during my absence. The few personal items that I had, I put in storage. I spent one day at Ruth's. During my stay with them, she brought me up to date on my ex-wife. Her parents disowned her when they saw the video of the two men and never spoke to her again after she left their home. Her brother, Ruth's ex-boyfriend, also disowned her. She has been arrested at least 3 times for selling illegal substances and is now in prison. After I left Ruth, I spent 3 days with my parents. Before I left, I talked to Christina many times and found out that on the day I left Leavenworth, she moved out of her parents' house to a furnished apartment in the city, which made her father very angry. She refused to talk to him, and according to her mother, he didn't know whether to be angry or offended, so he did both. I arrived at the departure point and checked in. The sergeant at the counter looked at my order, excused himself, and went into the office behind his back. A couple of minutes later, he returned with the first lieutenant. "Excuse me, Captain Reynolds, but could you come into my office?" I followed him. "Have a seat, Captain." He paused to collect his thoughts. "Your order has been changed. It looks like your initial order was given by mistake. Leavenworth is conducting an investigation to find out what happened. But here's your new order. You must report to Leavenworth and return to your previous duties." He held up his hands. I've never seen anything like it. I have seen orders changed, but there has never been such a thing as a serviceman returning to his former duties, and to top it all off, yesterday we received this letter with a personal courier who was supposed to deliver it to you personally. It was a sealed envelope with the return address, General Command, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. The lieutenant handed me my new order. "Congratulations, Captain. You're going home." I went outside and opened the envelope. You were right. That's all it said. It was signed M. Woodley. I took out my phone and called Christina. She answered on the first call, "Where are you?" "I'm going home." "Do you know that my order has been canceled?" "You're kidding. What happened?" "Apparently, your father has changed his mind. I'm going back to Leavenworth." "Oh my God. How soon can you come?" "In a couple of days, I need to stop and pick up my pickup, and then I'll drive from there." "Hurry up, honey. I'll start looking for a bigger apartment." The return broke all records. We had been talking on the phone all the time for the last 50 miles. And she was running towards me when I turned onto the street where she had an apartment. The truck barely had time to stop when I jumped out of it and found myself in her arms. We kissed and hugged as the transport circled us. Military towns are used to the fact that meetings with relatives take place in unusual places. It took a few minutes before we calmed down and went inside, where we kissed and hugged again. After the passion subsided, we sat down next to her on her couch and talked. She talked to her mother, but not to her father. Her mother did not know that my order had been changed. But when she was informed of this, she was happy for her daughter. I showed her the short note I had received from her father. "What does this mean? What is it?" she asked. I told her about my meeting with him the morning I left. "I'm surprised he didn't put you in jail for talking to him like that." She said, "Me too. I'm sure it was contrary to everything he religiously observes. To change your order," she said, "he didn't do it for me. He did this for you because he loves you, and it's hard for him to accept that he's no longer the only man in your life." She looked at me with love in her eyes. I looked around, got up, and took out of my pocket the ring I'd bought in Tennessee. When I picked up my pickup truck, I got down on one knee. Before I could say a word, she burst into tears. "Christine Louise Woodley, will you marry me?" She quickly got down on both knees, held out her left hand, and said, "Put it on my finger." As soon as the ring was where it would be for the next 50 years, she said it again. "Yes, Mark Hadley Reynolds, I will marry you and love you until I die." The kiss we exchanged changed my whole life. I felt him with my whole body and with my whole soul. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I would spend the rest of my life in love with this woman. Every man believes that his wife or girlfriend is the most beautiful, perfect creature on earth, and I was no exception. I asked her if she wanted to go to a first-class hotel for our first night together, but she said no. This apartment is our first home. I want our first time to be in our first house. She had time to prepare for my return home, and she did it her own way. For the first dinner together in this apartment, we had champagne, poté, and chocolate-covered strawberries. I even drank some champagne. Before the celebration, she wanted to take a bubble bath. She did so and came out dressed in a pale blue outfit consisting of panties, a bra, and something like a cape that complemented the whole outfit. While she was opening champagne and pote, I took a shower. Very quickly, when I entered the room, I was wearing only a bathrobe. We sat on the bed, ate and drank. We kissed from time to time. There was less and less food and more kisses until the tray of food disappeared. We were standing next to the bed and she untied the belt of my robe. She held up the robe and looked into my eyes. This is the first time I've undressed a man. Mark, I've always wanted it to be with the true love of my life, and that's you. I know men call me the Ice Queen, but I promise you that I will try to be the best cheater you can be when you want to be. With that, she pulled the robe off my shoulders and let it fall to the floor. She lifted her head and looked into my eyes. He's beautiful, Mark, and this is mine. I've heard of women kneeling, but I've never been able to imagine myself in this place. And now I can't wait to do it. I enjoyed the feeling for a couple of minutes before I lifted her to her feet. Now it's your turn, I said, kissing her. I stepped back and untied the little blue cape she was wearing. I laughed but got up anyway. She started laughing. What's funny? I asked. Everything happens exactly as the girls described, and I like it. All my life I've been waiting to find someone I can love like this. And I've been dreaming of the very moment when I can say to the love of my life, "Take me." She reached out to me, guided me towards her, and I slowly entered her. I felt her sigh as I entered her, and she began to tremble. Oh my God, this is fantastic, Mark. I've never felt anything like this. She began to move her hips up and down, while I was going in and out. In the end, we ran out of steam around 4 in the morning. Her phone woke us up at 10. "Hi, Mom," she said cheerfully. As she usually did, she turned on the speakerphone. "Good morning. Have you heard from Mark? Wasn't he supposed to be back today?" She looked at me and smiled broadly. "He came home yesterday and spent the night with me, Mom." "Oh, all right then. He asked me to marry him, Mom, and I agreed." We heard her brighten noticeably. "That's great. When will the day come?" Christina laughed. "We don't know yet. We thought we'd discuss this with you and Dad over dinner tonight." "You don't mind?" It was news to me, so I just looked at her with big eyes, thinking she was crazy. She looked at me and winked. "That would be great. What kind of wine does he like?" "He doesn't usually drink, but he'll have some champagne with us." "Good. You at 6:30. Will that suit you?" "Great. See you then." "Oh, should I tell your father? Or would you rather do it yourself?" "You can tell him if you think he can handle it. Otherwise, let Mark handle it." When the call ended, she looked at me and said, "Take me, fiancé." It was a request that I did not fail to fulfill. We rang the doorbell at 6:30. Her father opened the door. "Why did you ring the doorbell?" "You have a key," he told his daughter. "I know, but I don't live here anymore, Dad." I saw him flinch, but brighten noticeably when his daughter hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. I heard her whisper, "Thank you," when she kissed him. It wasn't easy for him. He held out his hand to shake, and I shook it. "Dinner is on the table? So let's get to it," he said. We were in a small family dining room, not the one reserved for large dinner parties. Christina and I were sitting on opposite sides of the table. The champagne was already poured. "Dad, Mom, Mark wants to say something." I took a deep breath. "First of all, General Woodley, I would like to thank you for the help you provided in canceling my order." I said it in such terms, knowing full well that he and only he is responsible for both the publication and the subsequent cancellation of orders. Secondly, General Woodley and Mrs. Woodley, I want you both to know that I love your daughter and have proposed to her. When I agreed, Christina said, holding out her hand first to her mother, then to her father. Her mother groaned and rejoiced. Her father, I'm sure, was told to take it gracefully and not make a fool of himself. He was kind enough to make a toast. After dinner, the two women went somewhere to start making wedding plans. The General and I went to the library, where he poured 2 port wines. As I understand it, you don't drink alcohol except on special occasions. I think it will be 2 of them, in one evening. I took a small glass. "Congratulations, Mark. You did something I never wanted to live up to." He took a small sip and motioned for both of us to sit down. I knew it would happen sooner or later, but he changed his mood when he spoke again. "You were right when you criticized me. I thought I knew what was best for my daughter. But when I saw the way she looked at you at dinner, I realized how wrong I was. I'm just asking you to take care of her and love her for the rest of your life. The way you love her today. You can count on it, sir. I would never knowingly do anything to hurt her. I believe in it." He looked at me. "But there's one thing I'm having trouble with." "What is it, sir?" "I don't like that you lived together before the wedding." Apparently, Christina's mother had told him about it. "You have no choice, sir." "I didn't think so, but I decided to try." 6 months after that dinner, Christina's father retired and became the CEO of a large automotive manufacturer's spare parts purchasing division. 2 months after that, Christina and I got married. She was obviously pregnant when she walked down the aisle. My brother Matthew showed up with his Nashville megastar, who put on an impromptu show at our reception. He gave Christina's parents copies of all his CDs. Matthew said that my parents only listened to gospel music, a genre of spiritual Christian music, so he gave them several copies of his gospel recordings. The day after we returned from our honeymoon, Ernie Bigelow called me. He congratulated me and said that he had won $1,000 from 2 other men who were dating Christina. They bet him that I would fall on my face like them. Ernie disagreed with him and took some money. 2 months after the wedding, Jason Richard Reynolds was born. 6 months after that, I quit and went to work for my father-in-law. Just from the moment he started walking, Jason became attached to his grandfather, and they became best friends. My father-in-law was always jealous when we took Jason to visit my parents. During one of our trips to Tennessee, my sister Ruth brought me up to date on a case involving my ex-wife. It turns out that after she got out of prison, she went into business. One of her best-selling films was a recreation of her session with 2 men and her first DP double penetration experience. Jason was going well until it turned out that she was sending some of her artwork by mail. The federal government is not looking at this very favorably. As a result, she's looking at 3 to 5. One weekend, Jason was with Woodley's grandparents at their lake house. Christina and I were alone at home, huddled together on the couch watching some Girly the movie. She turned to me. "Mark, yes, do you like being a father?" "Of course." "And what? Do you like another child?" I leaned back and looked at her. "What do you want to say? That you're pregnant?" She put her hand on my lap and started fiddling with it. "No, but I would like to.